The alarm klaxons wailed throughout the UES thunder as Captain James Reed rushed to the bridge. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow as crew members scrambled to their stations. The thunder, humanity's most advanced warship, shuddered violently as another wave of unknown energy washed over its hull. Status report. Reed barked as he took his command chair. His weathered face, marked by 15 years of military service, remained calm despite the chaos erupting around him. Lieutenant Emma Wilson, the ship's science officer, frantically worked her console. Unknown spatial disturbance. Sir, it appeared without warning. Nothing like this in our databases. Reed watched the main view screen as a swirling vortex of blue and violet energy expanded before them. The Thunder was a magnificent vessel, nearly half a mile long, armed with the most powerful weapons humanity had ever created, and crewed by 300 of Earth's finest. Yet in this moment, facing this cosmic anomaly, it seemed terribly small. "Engines at maximum reverse thrust," ordered Reed. "Get us out of here." No response from the engines, Captain, reported Officer Tom Grant from the helm. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his fingers flew across the controls. "Whatever that thing is, it's pulling us in." The Thunder had been on a routine patrol near the border of human space, showing the flag as tensions with the Vorn Imperium continued to rise. The Vorn, a coalition of aggressive alien species united under a single banner, had been encroaching on human colonies for years. Their technology far outpaced humanity's, and their intentions were clear: conquest. "Send emergency broadcast to Fleet Command," Reed said, his voice steady despite the growing dread in his chest. "Include all sensor data on this anomaly." Communications Officer Lisa Brown nodded grimly. "Transmitting now, but there's heavy interference. Not sure if it's getting through." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency even as the situation deteriorated. The Thunder continued its inexorable slide toward the maw of the spatial disturbance. "Structural integrity failing on decks 4 through 7, reported Chief Engineer Mike Foster over the comm. His voice crackled with static. "Captain, whatever this thing is, it's tearing us apart." Reed stood from his chair, facing the view screen and the swirling vortex that would be either their doom or their destiny. "All hands, brace for impact. This is not the end of our story, it's just a detour." The Thunder slipped into the anomaly with a final violent shudder. The distortion closed behind them, leaving only empty space where humanity's greatest warship had been moments before. 3 days later, in the quiet officers' lounge of Earth's orbital defense station, Lieutenant Mark Davis stared out the viewport at the stars. His leave had been extended due to a family emergency. His mother's health had taken a turn, and for the first time in his career, he found himself grateful for shore duty. If not for that unexpected extension, he would have been aboard the Thunder with his best friend, Captain James Reed. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Admiral John Wilson entered. His imposing figure, made more severe by his dress uniform adorned with medals from the early Vorn conflicts, approached Davis slowly. "Lieutenant," Wilson said, his deep voice somber, "I thought I might find you here." Davis stood at attention. "Admiral." Wilson gestured for him to sit and took the chair opposite. "The search teams have returned. No sign of the Thunder, no debris field, no emergency beacons. Nothing." Davis felt cold dread spreading through his chest. "They can't have just vanished, sir. The Thunder was equipped with redundant emergency systems. If they were in trouble, we would know." "Unless those systems were destroyed too quickly to activate," Wilson said, placing a tablet on the table between them. "This is the last transmission we received. It cut off mid-broadcast." Davis picked up the tablet with trembling hands. The screen showed the final sensor readings from the Thunder, a massive energy spike, unlike anything in human records, followed by nothing. Complete silence. "We're declaring them lost with all hands," Wilson said quietly. "I'm sorry, Mark. I know Reed was your friend." Davis shook his head. "No, there's more to this. James wouldn't go down without a fight. There would be something, a distress call, debris, anything. Wilson's expression hardened slightly. I understand your reluctance to accept this, but we need to face facts. The Thunder is gone, along with Captain Reed and 300 crew members. And we need to prepare for what comes next. What do you mean, sir? The Vorn. They've already begun probing our outer colonies. Without the Thunder, our defensive capabilities are significantly reduced. Wilson stood, straightening his uniform. Report to Fleet Command tomorrow at 800. You're being reassigned to the UES Defiant. We need every experienced officer we can get. After the Admiral left, Davis remained in the lounge, watching as Earth rotated slowly beneath the station. The Thunder had been humanity's pride, the culmination of decades of technological advancement, and the symbol of human determination to claim its place among the stars. Now it was gone, and with it, humanity's best hope against the Vorn threat. 6 months passed. The Vorn attacks intensified, focusing on the outer colonies. Argus IV fell after a 3-day siege. New Terra was evacuated just hours before Vorn ships appeared in orbit. Each loss pushed humanity further back toward Earth, their territory shrinking week by week. On the bridge of the Defiant, now Commander Mark Davis watched the tactical display with growing frustration as another colony's emergency beacon went silent. "We're too late," Captain Robert Morris said quietly. "Again." Davis clenched his fists. "If the Thunder were here." "But it isn't," Morris cut him off. "And wishful thinking won't stop the Vorn." The Defiant was a good ship, but smaller and less advanced than the Thunder had been. Like all remaining human vessels, it was outmatched by Vorn technology. Their weapons could barely penetrate Vorn shields, while Vorn energy beams sliced through human defenses like paper. After his shift, Davis returned to his quarters and pulled out his personal tablet. Despite orders to accept the loss and move on, he had spent his free time analyzing the Thunder's final transmission. There was something about the energy signature of that anomaly, something that nagged at the edge of his understanding. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Lisa Brown walked in, the same communications officer who had been on leave with Davis when the Thunder disappeared. Now she served aboard the Defiant as well. "Still at it?" she asked, nodding toward his tablet. Davis nodded. "There's something here, Lisa. That wasn't a natural phenomenon that took the Thunder. The energy pattern is too regular, too structured." "Mark," she said gently, "it's been 6 months. We have to accept." "I can't," he interrupted. "James is alive. I feel it. And we need him. We need the Thunder. Without them, Earth doesn't stand a chance against the Vorn." Lisa sat beside him, her expression sympathetic but concerned. "The memorial service is tomorrow. Will you be there?" Davis looked back at his tablet, at the swirling pattern of energy that had swallowed his friend and humanity's greatest ship. "Yes," he said finally. "I'll be there." What he didn't tell her was that he had no intention of saying goodbye. The Thunder wasn't lost. It was just missing. And somehow, someday, it would return. It had to. Because without it, humanity's days were numbered. And the storm of Vorn conquest would sweep them all away. 10 years passed like a slow-burning star. 10 years of retreat. 10 years of watching human colonies fall one by one to the Vorn Imperium. 10 years of funerals and evacuation orders. Commander Mark Davis, now wearing the insignia of a full captain, stood on the observation deck of Earth's last major orbital defense station. His once dark hair was now streaked with gray, and lines had formed around his eyes, the mark of a man who had spent a decade fighting a losing war. "Captain Davis, Admiral Wilson requests your presence in the command center." The young officer who delivered the message couldn't have been more than 20, too young to remember a time when humanity wasn't fighting for its survival. Davis nodded. "Tell him I'm on my way." The command center hummed with activity. Massive screens displayed the current positions of Vorn battle groups. Too many, and too close to Earth. "Admiral Wilson," now stooped with age, but still commanding respect with his mere presence, stood before the central tactical display. "Davis," Wilson said without looking up, "the Vorn have taken Mars Station. The evacuation ships got out just in time." Davis's jaw tightened. Mars Station had been humanity's second-largest off-Earth settlement. Casualties. "Too many," Wilson replied grimly. "But that's not why I called you here." He gestured to a smaller screen showing a wave pattern. "Communications picked this up 3 days ago. It came from beyond the Oort cloud." Davis studied the pattern. "A distress signal." "Not exactly." "Watch." Wilson tapped the screen, and the pattern began to cycle. It wasn't random noise, but a deliberate sequence, one that made Davis's heart skip a beat. "That's a Thunder protocol," he said quietly. "An old one. We used it during the early border skirmishes with the Vorn." Wilson nodded. "That's what our analysts thought. But there's more." He manipulated the display to show a tactical overlay of a recent battle near Jupiter's moons. 2 weeks ago, the Fifth Fleet was ambushed by a Vorn battle group. They were outgunned and outmanned. Then this happened. The display showed the human fleet executing a series of complex maneuvers, breaking formation, then regrouping in a pattern that confused the Vorn targeting systems. It was a tactic that hadn't been used in years. "They received tactical data packets," Wilson continued. "Origin unknown. The data included blind spots in Vorn sensor arrays that we didn't know existed. It saved the fleet." Davis felt a chill run down his spine. "You think it's connected to the Thunder signal?" "I think," Wilson said carefully, "that after 10 years, I'm willing to entertain possibilities I once dismissed." His eyes met Davis. "You never believed they were gone, did you?" "No, sir," Davis replied honestly. "Never." Wilson turned back to the display. "Take the Defiant. Follow that signal to its source." "But Davis," his voice lowered, "this stays quiet. If it's nothing, I don't want to give people false hope." Davis nodded, a fire igniting in his chest for the first time in years. "When do we leave?" "Yesterday," Wilson said. The Defiant wasn't the Thunder, but over the years, it had been retrofitted with every technological advancement humanity could muster. It was fast and stealthy, perfect for a mission beyond the edge of charted space. In his ready room, Davis assembled a small team. Chief Engineer Anna Miller, a brilliant woman who could coax miracles from the Defiant's engines. Communications Specialist Tom Baker, whose expertise in decryption was unmatched. And Lieutenant Kate Walsh, his executive officer and the best tactical mind in what remained of the fleet. "I've called you here because I trust each of you," Davis began. "What I'm about to share doesn't leave this room." He played the mysterious signal, watching their reactions. Miller frowned, Baker leaned forward in excitement, and Walsh maintained her professional composure. "That's a Thunder communication protocol," Baker said immediately. "But there's something embedded in it." His fingers flew over his tablet. It's Captain Reed's personal encryption code. I'd recognize it anywhere." Davis nodded, feeling vindicated after 10 long years. "Admiral Wilson has authorized us to track this signal to its source. Officially, we're on a long-range reconnaissance mission." "You think the Thunder is still out there?" Walsh said. It wasn't a question. "I do," Davis confirmed. "And if I'm right, it might be our last hope." Miller shook her head. "Even if the Thunder survived somehow, it's been 10 years. Their technology would be as outdated as ours compared to the Vorn. Unless," Baker interjected, his eyes bright with excitement, "they found something out there. Something that could help us." Davis stood, looking at each of them. "We leave in 6 hours. Get what you need and report to the Defiant. And tell no one where we're going." 3 weeks later, the Defiant drifted silently at the edge of the solar system. They had followed the mysterious signal through the Oort cloud and into the vast emptiness beyond, where stars seemed more distant and the darkness more complete. On the bridge, Baker worked feverishly at his console. "The signal's getting stronger, Captain. Whatever's generating it, We're getting close. Davis nodded. Maintain stealth protocols. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. Walsh approached with a datapad. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up unusual energy readings ahead. Nothing like foreign technology. Nothing like ours either. Davis took the pad, studying the readings. Distance. About 3 light hours, Walsh replied. At our current speed, we'll be in visual range in 18 hours. Davis handed the pad back. Set course, but approach with caution. As Walsh moved away, Miller called from her engineering station. Captain, we're receiving another transmission. This one's different. The main view screen flickered, showing a string of mathematical equations. Davis recognized them. Basic prime number sequences, universal mathematical constants, the kind of pattern intelligent species might use to communicate with unknown entities. It's a handshake, Baker said quietly. They're making first contact protocols. Davis felt a chill. Or they're testing to see if it's really us. He straightened in his chair. Respond with Captain Reed's authentication sequence. Let's let them know who we are. Baker complied, and for several tense minutes, the bridge crew waited. Then the view screen changed again, displaying a simple text message that made Davis's heart skip a beat. Mark, it's James. Stay on this course. We're coming to you, and we're not alone. The message was signed with a code phrase only James Reed and Mark Davis knew, a reference to an Academy prank they had pulled together 20 years ago. It's them, Davis whispered. It's really them. Even as the words left his mouth, the Defiant sensors blared warnings. A massive spatial distortion was forming directly ahead of them, the same kind of phenomenon that had swallowed the Thunder a decade earlier. All hands, battle stations, Davis ordered automatically, even as hope surged through him. Whatever comes through that rift, be ready. The bridge crew watched in tense silence as the distortion grew, a swirling maelstrom of energy that twisted the very fabric of space, and then, emerging like a ghost from the fog of legend, a massive shape began to take form. It was the Thunder. And yet, it wasn't. The hull was the same basic configuration, but it was larger, altered, covered in unfamiliar technology. Battle scars marked its surface, telling tales of countless conflicts. My God, Walsh breathed. What happened to it? Before Davis could respond, Baker called out from his station. Incoming transmission, Captain. Audio only. Davis nodded, and a familiar voice, older, rougher, but unmistakable, filled the bridge. Defiant, this is Captain James Reed of the UES Thunder. We've come home, and we've brought the storm. As the message ended, the sensors detected more spatial rifts opening. The Thunder hadn't returned alone, and whatever was following it through those rifts, Davis knew with sudden certainty, would change the course of the war and humanity's future forever. The command center of Earth's orbital defense station erupted into chaos as alarms blared from every console. Admiral Wilson rushed to the central display, where officers crowded around in disbelief. Report, Wilson demanded. A young officer looked up, her face pale. Massive object entering the solar system, sir. It crossed the Neptune orbital line 3 minutes ago. Vorn? Wilson asked, though something in his gut told him this was different. No, sir. It's moving too fast. Nothing should be able to move that fast. The officer adjusted her readings. Energy signature is off the charts. We've never seen anything like it. Another officer called out from his station. Sir, the object will reach Earth orbit in approximately 40 minutes at current velocity. Wilson's blood ran cold. Even the fastest Vorn ships took days to cross such distances. Whatever was heading toward them was using technology far beyond human understanding, perhaps beyond even Vorn capabilities. Sound general alert. All defensive platforms to maximum readiness. Wilson turned to his communications officer. Any word from the Defiant? No, sir. Still no contact since they left 3 weeks ago. Wilson stared at the approaching anomaly on the screen. Something told him these events were connected. Prepare evacuation protocols for all civilian stations, and get me a direct visual as soon as possible. 20 minutes later, the first images arrived from outposts near Mars. What they showed stunned everyone in the command center into silence. It was a ship, massive, scared, and unmistakably human in its basic design despite extensive modifications. Running along its hull, partially obscured by what appeared to be alien technology graphs, were 5 letters that sparked a wave of murmurs throughout the room. T-A-U-N-D-E-R. Impossible, someone whispered. Wilson leaned heavily against a console. After 10 years, after being declared lost with all hands, after becoming a legend and a symbol of humanity's failing struggle against the Vorn, the Thunder had returned. But it was change. Nearly 3 times its original size, the ship now bristled with unfamiliar weapons. Its hull gleamed with a metal alloy unknown to Earth science. Energy patterns rippled across its surface in hypnotic waves. It was the Thunder, but transformed into something beyond human engineering. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Thunder." Wilson nodded, and the main screen switched to show a face that, despite being weathered and aged far beyond the 10 years that had passed, was immediately recognizable. "This is Captain James Reed of the UES Thunder, returning to Earth space after unexpected deployment." The voice was deeper, rougher than Wilson remembered, and the face more lined, with a scar running from temple to jaw. But the eyes still held the same determination. "Request permission to enter Earth orbit. We come with knowledge and resources that will turn the tide against the Vorn." Wilson stepped forward. "Captain Reed, we thought you were dead. It's been 10 years. A flicker of something, pain, perhaps, crossed Reed's face. "For you, Admiral. For us, it's been much longer." He paused. "We don't have much time. Our intelligence indicates a major Vorn assault fleet will reach Earth within 12 hours. As if on cue, alarms sounded from the long-range detection grid. The tactical officer turned in his chair, face ashen. "Sir, massive Vorn fleet detected just beyond Jupiter's orbit. Hundreds of ships, the largest force we've ever encountered." Wilson looked back at Reed's image. "How did you know?" "We've learned many things during our absence, Admiral." Reed's expression hardened. "Permission to take defensive position between Earth and the approaching Vorn fleet." Wilson hesitated only a moment. "Granted, Captain. Welcome home." Captain Mark Davis stood in the Defiance airlock, heart pounding as the docking procedure with the Thunder completed. After 10 years of believing, of hoping against all evidence, he was about to see his friend again. The airlock cycled open to reveal a corridor unlike anything Davis had seen in a human vessel. The walls pulsed with soft blue light from circuitry that seemed almost organic in nature, and standing in the center, flanked by 2 crew members wearing unfamiliar uniforms, was James Reed. Davis almost didn't recognize him. Reed looked as though he had aged 30 years, not 10. His once dark hair was now completely white, and deep lines marked his face. When they embraced, Davis felt the unfamiliar hardness of cybernetic implants beneath Reed's uniform. "My God, James," Davis whispered, "what happened to you?" Reed smiled grimly. "Come. There's much to explain, and little time." They walked through corridors that seemed to blend human design with utterly alien technology. Crew members, human, but many sporting various implants or modifications, nodded respectfully as they passed. "The spatial anomaly that took us," Reed explained as they walked, "was a wormhole to another galaxy. One where time flows differently, faster. For every month that passed on Earth, we experienced 5 years." Davis did the math quickly. "You've been gone for 50 years, by our reckoning," Reed confirmed. "But that's not the most important part. The Vorn, they're not just a threat to humanity, Mark. They're a plague that has consumed countless civilizations across multiple galaxies." They entered what Davis assumed was the bridge, though it bore little resemblance to any command center he had seen. Instead of traditional consoles, crew members interfaced directly with flowing holographic displays. At the center stood a three-dimensional tactical map showing both the Thunder and the approaching Vorn Armada. When we arrived in that galaxy, we found the remnants of dozens of species that had been conquered or destroyed by the Vorn. Reed continued. Some had been fighting them for centuries. Others were recent victims. We united them. You built all this in 50 years. Davis gestured at the advanced technology surrounding them. Reed shook his head. We adapted, learned, integrated. The Thunder you knew is still here. He tapped the deck with his foot. But around it, we built something more. Something that could fight back. His eyes gleamed with a fierce light. And we did fight back, Mark. World after world, system after system, we pushed the Vorn back. And now we've brought that fight home. A young officer approached. Captain, the Vorn fleet has accelerated. They'll reach Earth in 3 hours. Reed nodded. Begin power-up sequence for main weapons array. And prepare the transit signal. Transit signal, Davis asked. Reed smiled for the first time. A predator's smile. We didn't come alone, old friend. He turned to the tactical display. The Thunder is just the vanguard. On the display, Davis watched as points of light appeared beyond the Thunder's position. Tiny at first, then growing. With growing amazement, he realized they were ships emerging from spatial rifts, similar to the one that had delivered the Thunder. A coalition fleet, Reed explained. Representatives from 12 species who have joined our fight against the Vorn. The first wave is just 50 ships, but more will follow once we secure Earth. Davis stared at the display, then at his old friend, now transformed into something between a war hero and a legend. You really did it. You found a way to fight back. Reed placed a hand on Davis's shoulder. The Thunder has returned, Mark. And with it, his eyes hardened as he looked at the approaching Vorn fleet, a storm of wrath the likes of which they have never seen. Outside, Earth's remaining defense fleet moved into formation alongside the Thunder. They seemed tiny and fragile next to the transformed warship, a stark reminder of how far humanity had fallen in 10 years. But for the first time in a decade, there was something new in the hearts of those who watched the Thunder take position between Earth and its would-be conquerors. Admiral Wilson stood in Earth's Defense Command Center, surrounded by officers whose faces showed a mixture of hope and disbelief. On the main display, the Vorn Armada approached, hundreds of sleek, predatory vessels that had terrorized humanity for a decade. But between that Armada and Earth floated the transformed Thunder and its alien allies. They're within weapons range, a tactical officer announced. Wilson nodded grimly. All Earth defense platforms, stand by. Let's see what Captain Reed and his coalition can do. The Vorn fleet entered the system with practiced precision. Their forward elements launched the devastating energy weapons that had shattered human defenses countless times before. In previous battles, such an opening salvo would have crippled the human fleet. This time was different. The Thunder didn't evade. Instead, it moved directly into the path of the energy beams. A rippling field of blue-green light flared around the ship as the Vorn weapons struck, and dissipated harmlessly. My God, someone whispered. Their shields just absorbed that like it was nothing. Before anyone could fully process what they'd seen, the Thunder responded. Sections of its modified hull slid open to reveal weapon arrays unlike anything Earth had developed. Beams of brilliant white energy lanced out, cutting through the Vorn's supposedly impenetrable defenses. The first 3 Vorn ships didn't just take damage. They disintegrated completely. The coalition vessels moved with the Thunder, forming a battle pattern that seemed to anticipate the Vorn's every move. Ships of 12 different designs, each showcasing technology from their respective civilizations, attacked in perfect coordination. Wilson watched, speechless, as the mighty Vorn fleet, the terror of human space for 10 years, found itself outmatched for the first time. On the Thunder's bridge, Captain Reed stood calmly at the center of controlled chaos. His officers, some human, some clearly not, worked their stations with practiced efficiency. Vorn command vessels altering formation, reported his tactical officer, a woman whose cybernetic eyes glowed softly as they interfaced directly with the ship's systems. They're trying to regroup for a concentrated attack. Reed nodded. Deploy phase shifters. Target their command links. Mark Davis watched from beside Reed, struggling to comprehend the battle unfolding before them. The Thunder's view screen showed Vorn ships, ships that had once seemed invincible, breaking apart under the Coalition's assault. "You've completely outclassed them," Davis said quietly. Reed's expression remained grim. "For now. The Vorn adapt quickly. We learned that the hard way." He turned to face Davis fully, and in the harsh light of the bridge, the extent of Reed's cybernetic enhancements became more apparent. A fine tracery of circuitry ran beneath the skin of his temples, and his eyes held an unnatural focus. "Walk with me," Reed said suddenly, gesturing toward a side chamber. Inside what appeared to be Reed's private ready room, Davis was surprised to find objects he recognized. Mementos from Earth, including a photograph of Reed's family, and a small model of the Thunder as it had been before its transformation. Reed noticed his gaze. "I keep them to remember who we were, what we're fighting for." He sank into a chair that adjusted automatically to his form. "You want to know what happened to us? The full story?" Davis nodded, taking a seat across from his old friend. 50 years, you said. I can't imagine." Reed's eyes grew distant. "The wormhole deposited us in a galaxy the Coalition now calls the Forge. Time flows differently there. We still don't fully understand why. We emerged in the middle of a battlefield. A small fleet of ships, from what we later learned was the Laren Confederation, was making its last stand against a Vorn invasion force. You joined the fight," Davis guessed. Reed nodded. "We had no choice. The Vorn attacked immediately." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "They were as surprised by our weapons as we were by theirs. Somehow, we survived that first engagement." He stood, pacing the room with the restlessness of a man accustomed to constant vigilance. "The Larans took us in, helped us understand where we were. They'd been fighting the Vorn for generations, along with other species who had formed a loose alliance. But they were losing, just like Earth was. Their technology was advanced in some areas, primitive in others. And you saw an opportunity," Davis said, beginning to understand. "A necessity," Reed corrected. "The Thunder was damaged. We needed their help to repair it, but we had knowledge and approaches they hadn't considered." He paused. "It started small. We shared some of our tactical systems. They shared some of their shield technology. Then we encountered the Marins, who had revolutionary propulsion systems, but weak weapons. The Keth, who understood energy manipulation like no species I've ever seen. You built a coalition," Davis said, impressed. Reed nodded. "It took 15 years. 15 years of diplomacy, of earning trust, of combining technologies and tactics. Some of the species had been enemies before the Vorn arrived. Getting them to work together wasn't easy." His eyes hardened. "But watching your homeworld burn is a powerful motivator. Every species in our coalition has lost at least one planet to the Vorn." A subtle vibration ran through the ship, and Reed glanced at a display embedded in his desk. "Phase 2 of the battle has begun. Our main fleet has engaged their reinforcements." Davis leaned forward. "James, how did you get back here? How did you find the way home?" Pain flickered across Reed's face. "That was the hardest part. It took our scientists, human and otherwise, 20 more years to understand the wormhole technology well enough to attempt creating our own. The first tests didn't go well. We lost ships, good people." He fell silent for a moment. "When we finally succeeded, we had no way of knowing exactly when or where we'd emerge. We aimed for Earth 10 years after our disappearance, and got lucky." "And now," Davis asked, "what happens after this battle?" Reed's gaze was unflinching. "Now we take the fight to them. The Vorn have a homeworld, a central authority. In 50 years of fighting them across another galaxy, we've learned their weaknesses, their command structure. For the first time, humanity and its new allies have a chance to end the Vorn threat permanently. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. "Captain to the bridge," a voice announced over the comm system. Reed rose in one fluid motion. That would be the Vorn flagship joining the battle. They always hold it in reserve until they realize they're losing. His eyes gleamed with anticipation. Let's go show them what the Thunder can really do. The Vorn flagship emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare-given form, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the transformed Thunder. Black and violet energy crackled along its hull as its weapons systems powered up. In Earth's command center, Admiral Wilson watched with renewed dread. That ship, it's at least twice the size of anything we've seen before. On the tactical display, the Coalition fleet regrouped, forming a defensive perimeter around Earth as the Vorn flagship advanced. Smaller Vorn vessels rallied around it, their formation tightening. The massive alien ship fired its main weapon, a beam of such intense energy that the command center's sensors briefly overloaded. The beam struck the Thunder directly. For one terrible moment, Wilson thought they had lost their miracle. The Thunder disappeared in a blinding flash of light and energy. Then the light faded, and impossibly, the Thunder remained, its shields glowing white-hot but intact. They withstood it, someone whispered in awe. The Thunder didn't retreat. Instead, it accelerated toward the Vorn flagship, its engines leaving trails of blue fire across the void. The Coalition ships followed, each vessel firing in a coordinated pattern that overwhelmed the flagship's defenses section by section. Wilson watched as the Thunder closed to point-blank range with the Vorn flagship, a maneuver that would have been suicide for any Earth vessel. The transformed warship fired all its weapons simultaneously, concentrating their power on a single point in the Vorn ship's hull. The resulting explosion lit up Earth's sky like a second sun. The Vorn flagship split apart, its core detonating in a chain reaction that consumed nearly a third of the remaining Vorn fleet. The command center erupted in cheers. After 10 years of defeat, of retreat, of watching colonies fall one by one, humanity had witnessed a victory that, until this moment, had seemed impossible. On a private channel, Wilson received a transmission from Captain Reed. "That was their supreme commander," Reed said, his voice tight with the exertion of battle. "The Vorn don't handle decapitation strikes well. The rest will retreat soon." Wilson watched as, true to Reed's prediction, the remaining Vorn ships began to disengage, jumping to hyperspace in groups. "What happens now, Captain?" Wilson asked. Reed's response was simple and carried the weight of 50 years of war and sacrifice. "Now, Admiral, we take back everything they took from us, and then we make sure they can never threaten anyone again." 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the planet buzzed with activity unlike anything seen in decades. In shipyards that once struggled to produce even basic defensive vessels, new ships took form, hybrids of human ingenuity and alien technology from a dozen worlds. Mark Davis, now promoted to admiral, stood in the observation lounge of Earth's largest orbital station, watching workers swarm over the skeleton of what would become humanity's second advanced warship. Beyond it floated the Thunder, its massive form casting a shadow over the construction. "Impressive, isn't it?" Davis turned to find Captain Reed approaching, his white hair gleaming under the station lights. Despite 6 months of relative peace, Reed still moved with the wariness of a man who had spent 50 years in constant battle. "The Defender will be operational in 3 months," Davis said, gesturing to the ship under construction. 5 more are in various stages of completion around the system. "We're building faster than we ever thought possible." Reed nodded, his cybernetic eyes taking in every detail of the construction. "And the planetary defense grid, complete as of yesterday. Earth is now protected by the same shield technology that saved the Thunder from the Vorn flagship." Davis smiled slightly. "It's hard to believe how quickly things have changed." It was true. In half a year, humanity had advanced centuries. The knowledge brought back by the Thunder and shared by their coalition allies had transformed not just Earth's defenses, but human society itself. Medical technology had leaped forward, energy production had been revolutionized, and for the first time in a decade, humanity looked to the stars with hope rather than fear. "Have you received word from the reclamation fleets?" Reed asked, his voice carefully neutral. Davis nodded. New Terra was liberated last week. The Vorn abandoned it rather than face our forces. He paused. "That's 8 colonies retaken without firing a shot. They're running, James." For now. Reed's expression remained grim. "The Vorn are regrouping, make no mistake. We've bought time, but the war is far from over." A young officer approached them, saluting smartly. "Admiral Davis, Captain Reed, your presence is requested in the Coalition Council chamber. The delegates have arrived." The Coalition Council chamber had once been Earth's Senate Hall. Now it housed representatives from 13 species, 12 from the Coalition fleet that had followed the Thunder home, and humanity. At the center of the circular room stood a holographic display showing the current state of known space, with Vorn-controlled territories marked in red, Coalition territories in blue, and contested areas in purple. As Davis and Reed entered, the assembled delegates rose in respect. Davis still found it strange to be in the presence of so many alien species, some humanoid, others wildly different in form, yet all shared a common purpose that transcended their biological differences. High Counselor Thal of the Lyran Confederation, a tall being with iridescent skin and 4 arms, stepped forward. "Honored representatives of Earth, we bring news from the galactic rim. 3 more Vorn battle groups have withdrawn from the sectors surrounding the wormhole aperture. Our supply lines to the Forge Galaxy are now secure." Reed nodded in satisfaction. The wormhole that had brought the Thunder home was now stabilized, allowing regular travel between Earth's galaxy and the Forge. More coalition ships arrived weekly, strengthening the Allied forces. "There is another matter to discuss," said Ambassador Kree, a member of the insectoid Keth species. His translator device converted his clicking speech to smooth English. "Our science consortium has completed analysis of the data recovered from the Vorn flagship. We now believe we have located their homeworld." The chamber fell silent. In 50 years of fighting across 2 galaxies, no coalition force had ever confirmed the location of the Vorn Central Command or their original planet. The Vorn had always been an expanding empire with no apparent center. The holographic display shifted, zooming in on a star system deep in Vorn territory. A red planet orbited a yellow sun, surrounded by defensive installations. "Vorn Prime," Kree continued, hidden behind a network of spatial distortion fields that made it appear to be an uninhabitable system. "Our new sensors can now penetrate this disguise." Reed stepped forward, studying the display intensely. Their central hive, their leadership, their production facilities. His voice was soft, but carried throughout the silent chamber. "Everything we've been fighting for 50 years. Davis moved to stand beside his friend. "How certain are we of this intelligence?" 97% confidence, replied Kree. "The energy signatures match what we have observed from their highest command vessels." A human representative from Earth's government spoke up. "What are you proposing, exactly?" Reed turned to face the assembly, his posture straightening as if a great weight had settled on his shoulders once more. "I am proposing that we end this war. Not just push the Vorn back, not just reclaim what they took from us, but strike at their heart and break their ability to threaten any civilization ever again." The chamber erupted in discussion, some voices supporting immediate action, others counseling caution. Davis watched as Reed waited patiently for the noise to subside. "We have all lost worlds to the Vorn," Reed continued when silence returned. "Many of you have lost your original homeworlds. Some of your species are now reduced to a fraction of your former numbers. Earth was lucky. We caught the Vorn early in their expansion into this galaxy, and now we have stopped them before they could do to humanity what they did to so many of you." He gestured to the display showing Vorn Prime. For the first time in the history of any of our civilizations, we have the location of their center and the combined might to strike it. I do not suggest this lightly, but I believe we must act now, while they are still reeling from their defeats. High Counselor Thal raised one of her four hands. The coalition fleet stands ready, Captain Reed. But such an offensive would require a leader with intimate knowledge of both foreign tactics and coalition capabilities, someone who has faced them in both galaxies. All eyes turned to Reed. Reed looked at Davis, a silent question in his gaze. Davis nodded slightly. "I will command the offensive," Reed said, his voice firm. "The Thunder will lead the coalition fleet to Vorn Prime." 3 weeks later, Davis stood on the Thunder's bridge as the massive vessel prepared to depart. Around them, over 200 coalition ships formed the largest Allied fleet ever assembled, the spearhead of a force that would change the course of galactic history. "You sure you won't reconsider?" Reed asked quietly, standing at his command position. "Earth could spare you for this mission." Davis smiled. "My place is here, defending what we've reclaimed. Besides," he gestured to the fleet visible through the view screen, "you've got this well in hand." Reed nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We'll return when it's done." "I know you will." Davis extended his hand, and Reed clasped it firmly. "The Thunder always comes home, even if it takes a while." A slight smile touched Reed's lips, the expression still strange on a face that had seen half a century of warfare. "Take care of Earth, Mark. We'll take care of the Vorn." As Davis prepared to return to his shuttle, Reed called after him. "You know, in all our years fighting across the Forge, do you know what gave the Coalition hope? What made species who had never met humans willing to follow us?" Davis shook his head. "It wasn't our technology. It wasn't even our tactics." Reed's cybernetic eyes gleamed with an emotion Davis couldn't quite identify. "It was our adaptability, our stubborn refusal to accept defeat. When the Thunder was pulled into that wormhole, we could have given up, tried to live out our lives in a strange galaxy. Instead, we fought. We learned. We united people who had never worked together before." He gestured to the bridge around them, where humans worked alongside beings from a dozen worlds. "That's humanity's real strength, Mark. Not the ships we build or the weapons we design, but our ability to face the impossible and find a way forward." Davis nodded, feeling the truth of those words. "Give them hell, James. Count on it." From the observation deck of Earth's orbital station, Admiral Mark Davis watched as the Thunder led its fleet toward the edge of the solar system. One by one, the ships activated their wormhole drives, disappearing in flashes of light as they began the journey to Vorn Prime. The Thunder was the last to depart. For a moment, the transformed warship seemed to hesitate, as if giving one final salute to the world it had saved. Then, in a burst of energy that briefly outshone the sun itself, it vanished into the depths of space. Davis stood alone as the light faded, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this point. 10 years ago, the Thunder had disappeared, taking with it humanity's best hope against the Vorn. Its loss had marked the beginning of a decade of retreat and defeat. Now its return had transformed not just the war, but humanity itself. Earth was no longer alone in the universe, no longer fighting a desperate, losing battle against an overwhelming enemy. Now they stood at the center of an alliance of worlds, united by common purpose and shared determination. The lost warship had returned, and with it came not just a storm of wrath against their enemies, but the dawn of a new era for humanity among the stars. As the last traces of the Thunder's passage faded from Earth's sensors, Davis smiled. Whatever the outcome of the battle to come, one thing was certain. The story of humanity's journey to the stars was just beginning. And this time, they would write it themselves. Captain James Miller stood at the viewport of Waypoint 37, staring into the endless dark of space. The small frontier outpost hung at the edge of human territory, a lonely sentinel watching the stars. Most officers saw assignment here as punishment, but Miller had requested it. Out here, away from the bustle of the Central Worlds. He could pursue his true passion. "Captain, you've got another package," said Lieutenant Davis, dropping a small container on Miller's desk. "All the way from Earth this time." Miller turned from the viewport, his weathered face brightening. "Finally. I've been waiting months for this." He opened the package carefully, revealing an old metal badge. To most, it would look like junk, a piece of scrap. But to Miller, it was treasure. The faded insignia of the Third Deep Space Fleet, active during the Vraxian War 3 centuries ago. "Another addition to your collection of fairy tales?" Davis asked with a smirk. Miller didn't take offense. The younger officers always mocked his hobby. "History, Lieutenant, not fairy tales." "The Retribution is a myth, sir. Every Academy cadet knows that." Miller picked up the badge, feeling its weight. "That's what they teach now, yes. But myths often have roots in truth." The story of the Retribution was known to every child who dreamed of the stars. During the darkest days of the war against the lizard-like Vraxians, humanity built a superweapon, a battleship unlike any other. It was said to be the size of a small moon, carrying weapons that could destroy planets. In the old stories, the Retribution fought a final battle against the enemy fleet, and both disappeared, never to be seen again. Official history called it propaganda, invented to boost morale when humanity was losing the war. But Miller had spent 20 years collecting evidence suggesting otherwise. "Messages for you, Captain," called the communications officer. "One from your wife, and another, strange one." "Strange how?" Miller asked, walking to the communication station. "It came through on an old frequency. Very old, and it's repeating." Miller leaned over the console, feeling his heart beat faster as he saw the signal pattern. "This frequency hasn't been used since the war." "What war?" asked the young officer. "The Vraxian War. Before the peace treaty." Miller studied the signal. "Can you clean it up?" After several minutes of work, the static resolved into a clear pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. "An ancient distress code. Where is it coming from?" Miller asked. The officer checked his instruments. "The dead zone, sir. Grid 19-7. The dead zone. A region of space avoided by all ships due to strange sensor readings and rumors of vanished vessels." Miller had always wondered what secrets it held. "Sir," said Commander Alex Taylor, Miller's second-in-command, "you're not thinking of investigating that signal, are you?" Miller was already walking toward the command center. "I'm not just thinking about it, Alex. I'm doing it." Taylor followed, lowering her voice. "With all due respect, sir, that's crazy. The dead zone is off-limits for good reason. And this signal is probably just interference." 333 is not random interference," Miller replied. "Someone set that signal to repeat, and it matches accounts from my research." Taylor sighed. She was a good officer, practical, and by the book. She had served with Miller for 5 years and respected him. But his obsession with the Retribution was the one thing that worried her. "Sir, even if, and that's a big if, there's something there, we need authorization from command." Miller nodded. "I'll request it immediately." 3 hours later, Miller stood before the holographic images of 3 admirals. He had presented his case, showing the signal and its match to historical records. "Captain Miller," said Admiral Grant, "your request to investigate is denied. Waypoint 37 is a monitoring station, not an exploration vessel." "Admiral, this could be the greatest historical find of our time," Miller argued. "It could also be nothing," said Admiral Wong. "Or worse, a trap. The Vraxians may be our allies now, but there are still rogue elements who remember the war." Miller tried one more approach. "What if it is the Retribution? The technology on that ship would be centuries ahead of even our current level. We can't let that fall into the wrong hands." The admirals exchanged looks. Miller had touched on their real fear. "Very well," said Admiral Grant finally. "You may take a small team to investigate, but at the first sign of danger, you withdraw. Is that clear?" Perfectly clear, Admiral. Thank you. As the transmission ended, Miller found Taylor waiting. We're going, aren't we? She asked. We leave in 6 hours. Prepare a team. 5 security officers and 2 engineers. This is a mistake, Taylor said, but she was already mentally selecting the crew. Miller returned to his quarters and opened a locked drawer in his desk. Inside was his most prized possession, a handwritten journal supposedly from a survivor of the Retribution's last battle. Most experts had called it a fake, but Miller had always believed. He opened it to a dog-eared page and read the familiar words. Should anyone find this account, know that we did not fall in battle. We were betrayed. The ship lives, though damaged beyond repair. We sleep now, in the cold between stars, but we will return, and we will have our revenge. Miller closed the journal. For 20 years, he had searched for proof that the Retribution was real. Now, he might finally find it. 6 hours later, their small ship left waypoint 37, heading toward the dead zone. As they approached the coordinates, sensor readings became erratic. Something's interfering with our systems, reported the engineer. Keep going, ordered Miller. Taylor looked nervous. Sir, if our sensors fail completely, we'll be blind out here. Sometimes you have to trust more than sensors, Commander. As they pushed deeper into the zone, a massive shape began to appear on their view screen. Just a shadow at first, blocking the stars. But as they drew closer, the outline became clear. A ship, the largest any of them had ever seen. Old and battle-scared, but unmistakably human in design. My God, whispered Taylor, her doubts evaporating. It's real. Miller stared at the massive vessel, emotion tightening his throat. There, emblazoned on the hull in faded letters, was the name he had searched for his entire career. Retribution. Not just real, Miller said quietly. It's alive. As if in response to his words, lights began to flicker along the ancient battleship's hull, waking after centuries of darkness. Approach with caution, Miller ordered as their small scout ship edged closer to the massive battleship. The Retribution hung in space like a sleeping giant, its hull scarred with the marks of ancient battles. No response to our hails, reported Lieutenant Davis from the communications station. If there's anyone alive in there, they're not talking. Commander Taylor studied the sensor readings, her earlier skepticism replaced by professional concern. The ship's power systems are active, but minimal. Life support appears to be functioning in some sections, but at very low levels. Miller couldn't take his eyes off the view screen. The Retribution was even more impressive than the stories described. Nearly 2 kilometers long, with weapon ports that could house cannons bigger than their entire scout ship. This was a vessel built for one purpose, to end a war. I'm detecting a docking bay on the starboard side, said Officer Wilson, their pilot. The doors are partially open. We could slip inside. Do it, Miller said. Slow approach, no sudden movements. If that ship's defense systems are still active, we don't want to trigger them. Their scout ship glided toward the ancient battleship, passing through the partially open bay doors into a cavernous hangar. Emergency lights flickered dimly, casting long shadows across rows of fighter craft, designs no one had seen in centuries. These ships are perfectly preserved, Taylor whispered, awe evident in her voice. Look at the technology. It's nothing like our historical records. When they landed, Miller divided the team. Taylor, you and Davis check the bridge. Wilson, take the engineers to the engine room. I want to know what's keeping this ship powered after all this time. The rest of you come with me to find the crew quarters. They sealed their environment suits. The air aboard the Retribution might be toxic after centuries, and entered the silent corridors of the legendary battleship. Miller led his team through hallways that seemed to stretch forever. Unlike the smooth white corridors of modern ships, the Retribution's passages were industrial, built for war rather than comfort. Occasionally, they passed signs of battle, scorch marks on walls, sections where emergency bulkheads had sealed off breaches. "Captain, look at this," said Security Officer Patel, pointing to a sealed door marked CRYOB1. Miller's heart raced. The journal he'd read had mentioned the crew entering cryosleep. "Can we get this open?" The team's engineer, Dr. Foster, examined the control panel. "It's an old system, but I think I can bypass it." After a few minutes, she announced, "Got it." The door slid open with a hiss of escaping air. Inside was a large chamber filled with rows of cryopods, each containing a human form. Frost covered the transparent tops, making it difficult to see the faces within. "Are they alive?" Patel asked. Foster checked a still-functioning terminal. "According to this, yes. The pods are all in working order. These people have been in suspended animation for over 300 years. Miller approached the nearest pod, wiping away the frost to reveal the face of a young officer, his expression peaceful in frozen sleep. "They survived," he whispered. "All this time, they were here, waiting." Miller's radio crackled. "Captain, this is Taylor. We've reached the bridge. You need to see this." 20 minutes later, Miller stood on the bridge of the Retribution, staring at holographic displays that shouldn't have been possible with the technology of that era. "The ship's AI is still functioning," Taylor explained. "It's been running on minimal power, maintaining life support for the cryobase and watching for something." "Can we communicate with it?" Miller asked. "We've been trying, but it's not responding fully. I think it's defensive. It doesn't recognize us." As if in response to her words, the holographic displays flickered, and a computerized voice spoke. "Unidentified personnel detected. Security protocols engage. Identify yourselves or face defensive measures." Miller stepped forward. "I am Captain James Miller of the Human Alliance starship Waypoint 37. We are human, like the crew of this vessel. Genetic verification required." The AI responded. A beam of light scanned each of them. "Human genetic patterns confirmed, but uniforms and equipment do not match records. Temporal anomaly detected. Current stardate verification required." Miller gave the date according to the standard calendar. There was a long pause. Then, "Data indicates a temporal displacement of 327 standard years, awaiting command authorization to proceed." "We don't have command authorization," Taylor said quietly. "We're not from their time." Miller thought quickly. "Computer, we are descendants of the human forces you were designed to serve. We detected your distress signal and came to investigate." Another pause. "Partial access granted. Critical systems remain locked. Full access requires command-level authorization from Captain Thomas Reed or designated successor." The holographic displays change, showing detailed scans of the ship. Most systems were damaged, but the ship's core functions and its weapons were intact. "Look at this technology," Dr. Foster said in awe, examining the displays. "Some of these systems are beyond anything we have even now." "How is that possible?" "The history books got it wrong," Miller said. "The Retribution wasn't just propaganda. It was real. And it was far more advanced than anyone knew." As they studied the displays, Wilson's voice came over the radio. "Captain, we've reached the engine room. You won't believe what we found. This ship isn't powered by standard fusion drives. It's something else entirely, something I've never seen before." "Document everything," Miller ordered. "But don't touch anything yet." As Miller spoke, the bridge lights suddenly brightened, and warning signals flashed across the displays. "What's happening?" Taylor asked. The AI's voice returned, now more urgent. "Warning. Defensive systems activating. Unknown entities attempting access to secure areas. Security protocols engage." "There's someone else on board," Miller realized. "Computer, identify the unknown entities." "Unable to comply. Sensor systems damage. Threat assessment high. Activating remaining defensive protocols." Throughout the ship, emergency barriers began to close. Lights shifted to a deep red alert status. "Everyone back to the ship now," Miller ordered. As they rushed back through the corridors, Miller heard mechanical sounds ahead, the whir of servos and the heavy tread of metal on metal. "Down," he shouted, pulling Taylor behind a bulkhead just as a security drone rounded the corner. It was humanoid in shape but clearly mechanical, armed with weapons built into its arms. The drone paused, its sensors scanning the corridor. Miller held his breath, praying their environment suits would mask their heat signatures. After what seemed like an eternity, the drone moved on, continuing its patrol. "The AI doesn't fully trust us," Taylor whispered. "It's treating us as potential threats." "We need to find a way to communicate with it properly," Miller said. "And we need to wake someone who can give us the command authorization." They made it back to the hangar bay, where the rest of the team was already waiting at their ship. "What do we do now, Captain?" Taylor asked as they sealed the hatch. Miller looked back at the silent corridors of the Retribution, feeling the weight of history around him. "We need to gain its trust, and to do that, we need to learn exactly what happened to this ship and why it's been waiting for 300 years. As their scout ship prepared to leave the hangar, the AI's voice came through their communications system one more time. "Warning to unidentified human personnel. The Retribution awakens. Our mission continues. Revenge will be ours." Miller exchanged glances with Taylor. "Whatever happened to this ship and its crew," he said quietly, "they think they were betrayed. And they've been waiting a very long time to settle the score." Captain Miller sat in the small conference room aboard their scout ship, facing his team. The Retribution loomed outside their viewport, silent and threatening. "We need a plan," Miller said. "That ship is a historical treasure, but its AI sees us as potential enemies." Commander Taylor nodded, and it mentioned revenge. Revenge against whom? The war with the Vraxians ended centuries ago. Lieutenant Davis, who had been analyzing the limited data they gathered, spoke up. "Captain, I've been reviewing the ship's communication logs that we were able to access. The last entries mention a battle, but not against Vraxians." "Not against Vraxians." Miller leaned forward. "Then against whom?" "Other humans," Davis said quietly. "There are references to traitors and collaborators." The room fell silent as they absorbed this information. The history of the Vraxian War taught that humanity had united against a common enemy. The idea of human betrayal during that desperate time was shocking. "We need more information," Miller decided. "And there's only one way to get it. We need to wake someone up." "Sir, that's extremely risky," Dr. Foster warned. "Those people have been in cryosleep for over 3 centuries. The medical complications alone." "I understand the risks," Miller interrupted. "But we need answers, and we need someone who can command that eye." After much debate, they agreed on a plan. They would return to the Retribution with medical equipment and attempt to revive the ship's commander, who would likely have the highest authorization level. Hours later, they docked once again with the ancient battleship. This time, the AI did not immediately activate defensive measures, seemingly having assessed they weren't an immediate threat. "Computer," Miller called out as they re-entered the ship, "we wish to communicate with your commander. We need to revive Captain Reed from cryosleep." There was a long pause before the AI responded. Authorization insufficient for full revival protocols. However, limited communication may be established. Follow illuminated path to command cryobay. Lights flickered on along the corridor floor, creating a path deeper into the ship than they had ventured before. "It's cooperating," Taylor said, sounding surprised. "Why the change?" "Maybe it's had time to analyze us," Miller suggested. "Or maybe it's just curious." They followed the lights to a smaller cryobay marked Command SCI-FI. Inside were just 5 pods, more elaborate than the ones they had seen earlier. The central pod bore the name Admiral Thomas Reed, Fleet Commander. Admiral Taylor Reed. The stories always called him Captain. Miller approached the pod. "Computer, we request communication with Admiral Reed." Initiating limited revival protocol, the AI announced. Warning: full revival not authorized. Temporary consciousness only. The pod hummed to life. Frost melted away from the transparent cover, revealing the face of a man in his 50s, with a strong jaw and deep lines around his eyes. The pod opened with a hiss, and Reed's eyes fluttered. Dr. Foster rushed forward with her medical scanner. Vital signs stabilizing. Brain activity increasing. He's waking up. Admiral Reed's eyes opened fully, focusing slowly on the faces above him. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper after centuries of disuse. "Water," Foster said, and Davis quickly provided a small cup with a straw. After a few sips, Reed found his voice. "Who are you?" "You're not my crew." Miller stepped forward. "Admiral Reed, I'm Captain James Miller of the Human Alliance. We found your ship adrift and followed your distress signal." Reed's eyes narrowed. "Human Alliance? What happened to the Federation?" Miller exchanged glances with Taylor. "Admiral, this may be difficult to hear, but you've been in cryosleep for a very long time. The year is 2752. Reed stared at them, then closed his eyes. 300 years, he whispered. "Computer, confirm." "Confirmed, Admiral. Current timestamp indicates 327 years, 4 months, 18 days since cryoprotocol initiation." Reed struggled to sit up, and Foster helped him. "The war? The Vraxians? The war ended 3 centuries ago," Miller said gently. "We've been at peace with the Vraxians for generations." Reed's face hardened. "Peace with those monsters? After what they did?" "History records that both sides were exhausted by the conflict," Taylor explained. "A treaty was signed. The Vraxians retreated to their territory, and humanity rebuilt." "And the traitors?" Reed asked. "What happened to those who betrayed us?" Miller hesitated. "Admiral, our history doesn't mention any betrayal. The retribution is barely a footnote, a propaganda story created to boost morale." Reed laughed, a harsh sound. "Propaganda? Is that what they call us? The greatest warship ever built, with a crew of 15,000, and they erased us from history." "What really happened, Admiral?" Miller asked. "Why did the retribution disappear?" Reed's eyes burned with old anger. "We didn't disappear. We were betrayed. Sabotage. By our own people, high-ranking officials who made secret deals with the Vraxians." He gestured weakly around him. "This ship was humanity's last hope. We had technology decades ahead of anything else, weapons that could end the war in one decisive strike. But the night before our final mission, saboteurs struck. They damaged our main drive, our weapons systems." Reed's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "We managed to escape, but we were crippled. I made the decision to hide in this sector and put the crew in cryosleep while the automated systems repaired what they could. We left a distress signal that only true allies would recognize." Miller pulled out his old journal. "Someone did. A survivor. They wrote this." Reed's eyes widened as he recognized the book. "Lieutenant Park. I ordered her to take our last shuttle, to tell the truth about what happened. They let her live. The journal was dismissed as a fake," Miller explained. "But I always believed." Reed closed his eyes again, processing everything. "And now we're relics of a forgotten war." "Not forgotten," Miller said. "Misunderstood. Admiral, your ship contains technology that's still advanced by our standards. How is that possible?" Reed smiled faintly. "Project Prometheus. Our scientists made breakthroughs. Quantum computing, advanced AI, energy weapons beyond anything we'd had before. The Retribution wasn't just a battleship. It was a leap forward for humanity." "A leap that was buried," Taylor said thoughtfully. "If traitors really did betray you to the Vraxians, then they wouldn't want evidence of their betrayal floating around." Miller finished. "They'd want the Retribution forgotten." Reed tried to rise from the pod but was too weak. "I need to see what's become of the world. My crew, can they be revived?" With time and proper medical facilities, yes, Foster said. But not all at once, and not here. Admiral, Miller said carefully, you mentioned revenge earlier. Through your ship's eye. Revenge against whom? The traitors are long dead. Reed's expression darkened. Are they? Computer, full system activation. Authorization. Reed, Thomas J. Admiral, Federation ID 9275 Alpha. Around them, the ship hummed as systems that had been dormant for centuries came online. Lights brightened throughout the vessel. Full access granted, the AI announced. All systems online. Welcome back, Admiral Reed. Show me the Vraxian Empire, current configuration, Reed ordered. A holographic display appeared, showing a map of known space. The Vraxian territory glowed red, much larger than Miller had expected. That's not right, Taylor said, studying the map. The treaty limited their expansion. This shows they've doubled their territory. Reed nodded grimly. The betrayal continues. Computer, show military buildup in Vraxian space over the last 50 years. The display changed, revealing massive fleet movements and weapons installations, all hidden just beyond standard scanning range. Miller stared at the data in shock. They've been preparing for war this entire time. But our intelligence never detected this. Because someone didn't want you to see it, Reed said. The descendants of those who betrayed us. They are still protecting their Vraxian masters. He locked eyes with Miller. Now do you understand? The revenge isn't just for what happened 3 centuries ago. It's to stop what's about to happen now. Which is what? Taylor asked. Reed's voice was cold. The final elimination of humanity. The plan they'd been working toward all along. Captain Miller stood in the Retribution's massive command center, watching as Admiral Reed, now stronger after medical treatment, paced before the holographic displays. In the 12 hours since Reed's revival, the ancient battleship had come fully to life, systems humming with power that shouldn't have been possible after centuries of dormancy. These readings can't be right, Commander Taylor said, studying the data on Vraxian military strength. Our intelligence reports show their fleet at 1/5 this size. Your intelligence is compromised, Reed said flatly, just as ours was before the betrayal. He turned to Miller. Captain, you said humans and Vraxians have been at peace for centuries. What's the current state of human defenses? Miller hesitated before answering. Most of our military budget was cut decades ago. We maintain a defense fleet, but nothing like what we had during the war. Most of our ships are exploratory or scientific vessels now. Reed's face darkened. Perfect conditions for an invasion. Dr. Foster, who had been monitoring Reed's vitals, looked troubled. Admiral, with all due respect, is it possible your perspective is colored by your experiences? 300 years have passed. Perhaps the Vraxians have changed. Reed smiled without humor. Doctor, have you ever met a Vraxian? Yes, Foster replied. The medical exchange program has several Vraxian doctors. I've worked with them. And did they tell you about their life cycle? About the Great Molting? Foster looked confused. They're private about their biology. For good reason, Reed said. Every 75 years, their species undergoes a biological transformation. Their current forms, the ones walking among you as Alice, are just one phase. During the Great Molting, they change, become more aggressive, more predatory. He turned to the holographic display. Computer, show historical records of the Vraxian life cycle, classified file Read 7. The display changed to show biological scans of Vraxian physiology, revealing a transformation that turned the relatively humanoid aliens into something far more terrifying. Larger with enhanced musculature, thicker armor-like skin, and more pronounced predatory features. This is what we faced in the war, Reed explained. Not the diplomats you know today. And according to my calculations, they're due for another Great Molting within the next 5 years. The implications hung heavy in the air. They've been building their military while in their peaceful phase, Miller said slowly, preparing for when they transform, and positioning themselves throughout human space. Reed added, "Tell me, Captain, how many Vraxians live among humans now?" "Millions," Taylor answered. "They have embassies, cultural centers, and exchange programs on almost every major world." Reed nodded grimly. "Sleeper agents, all of them. When the molting comes, they'll strike from within while their main fleet attacks from without." Lieutenant Davis, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "If what you're saying is true, Admiral, we need to alert the Alliance immediately." "And say what?" Taylor asked. "That a 300-year-old admiral from a ship that's supposed to be a myth tells us our allies are planning to exterminate us. They'll think we've lost our minds." "We need proof," Miller said. "Hard evidence of Vraxian intentions." Reed moved to a secure console and entered a complex series of commands. "During our last mission, we collected intelligence from deep within Vraxian space, information about their long-term plans. The data was one reason they sabotaged us. They knew we had discovered their true intentions." The screen displayed ancient files, encoded in a format no longer used. "Can you decode these?" Miller asked. Reed nodded. "Computer, decode files using Prometheus algorithm. Authorization read Omega 9. As the files began to decrypt, the ship's sensors suddenly blared an alert. "Proximity warning," announced the AI. "Vessel approaching. Configuration matches Vraxian scout class." "They found us," Taylor said, moving to a tactical display. "How?" "We were careful with our approach." Reed's expression hardened. "They'd been watching this sector all along. They never stopped looking for us." "We need to leave," Davis urged. "Return to Alliance space and report what we found." Reed shook his head. "The Retribution isn't fully operational yet. We'd never outrun them." He turned to Miller. "Captain, your ship could escape. Take the data we've decoded and return to your command." Miller studied the tactical display, noting the Vraxian ship's approach vector. "They'd catch us before we reached the jump point. Besides, I'm not leaving the Retribution to be captured again." Reed seemed to reach a decision. "Then we fight. Computer, activate defensive systems. Prepare to engage." "Weapons systems at 40% capacity," the AI reported. "Full combat capabilities not recommended." "Admiral," Miller cautioned, "we're not at war with the Vraxians. Firing on their ship would violate the treaty." "A treaty they've been violating for centuries," Reed countered. "But I take your point. Let's see what they want first." The communication system activated, and a Vraxian face appeared on the main screen. Unlike the relatively benign appearance of modern Vraxian diplomats, this one had harder features. A military officer, his scales darker and ridge more pronounced. "Attention human vessel," the Vraxian said in perfect common. "You have entered restricted space. Power down and prepare to be boarded." "Restricted by whose authority?" Miller asked. "This sector is neutral territory under the Treaty of Armstrong." The Vraxian's eyes narrowed. "Your vessel has been detected interfacing with a derelict warship containing restricted technology. By order of the Vraxian Protectorate, we are confiscating this derelict." Reed stepped forward, into view of the communication panel. "This ship is under my command, Vraxian. It is not derelict, and you have no authority here." The Vraxian officer's expression changed to one of shock as he recognized Reed. "Impossible. You should be dead." "As you can see, I'm very much alive," Reed replied coldly. "As is the Retribution." The Vraxian recovered quickly. "Admiral Reed, your ship was reported destroyed over 3 centuries ago." "Reported by whom?" "The traitors who tried to sabotage us, or your government, which helped them." A tense silence followed. Then the Vraxian's posture changed, becoming more formal. "Admiral Reed, the war ended long ago. We are at peace with humans now. Allow us to escort you back to Alliance space, where historians will be eager to speak with you." Reed laughed harshly. and scientists eager to dissect my ship's technology. I think not. The Vraxian's voice hardened. That ship contains weapons in violation of treaty agreements. It must be surrendered. How interesting that you know what weapons this ship contains, Reed noted, when according to history, the Retribution never existed beyond propaganda. The Vraxian officer's composure slipped briefly. We have detailed records. Of a ship you claimed never existed, Miller interrupted, seeing the trap Reed had laid. You've been monitoring this sector, waiting for the Retribution to reappear, which means you knew it was here all along. The Vraxian's face showed cold anger now. You have 1 hour to surrender the vessel, or we will take it by force. The communication ended abruptly. That went well, Taylor said dryly. Reed turned to Miller. Now do you believe me, Captain? They feared the Retribution's return for centuries. Miller nodded slowly. But one Vraxian scout ship isn't much of a threat, even with our systems at partial power. That's not their real threat, Reed said, pointing to the tactical display. Look at their position. They're maintaining distance, just beyond our weapon range. Taylor understood first. They're stalling, waiting for reinforcements. Exactly, Reed confirmed. And when their battle fleet arrives, we'll be outnumbered. Miller made his decision. Then we need to act now. Admiral, can this ship still fight? The Retribution was built to face an entire Vraxian fleet, Reed said, a fierce light in his eyes. One scout ship. We'll show them why they feared us for 3 centuries. He turned to the command console. Computer, target Vraxian vessel. Prepare to fire warning shot. Let's remind them who they're dealing with. As the Retribution's weapons systems came online, the massive ship trembled with power that had lain dormant for centuries. Weapon charge, reported the AI. Target locked. Reed looked at Miller, seeking confirmation. This would be an act of war. But war, Miller now realized, had never truly ended. Miller nodded. Fire. A beam of energy, unlike anything in modern weapon systems, lanced out from the Retribution, passing just meters from the Vraxian ship's hull. The scout vessel immediately began evasive maneuvers. Message sent, Reed said with grim satisfaction. Now we prepare for their response. As if on cue, the tactical display lit up with new contacts. Dozens of them, emerging from jump points on the edge of the system. That's not a response, Miller said, staring at the display. That's an invasion fleet. The command center of the Retribution fell silent as everyone stared at the tactical display. Dozens of Vraxian warships were moving into attack formation, their weapons signatures flaring as they powered up. That's a full battle fleet, Taylor whispered. They were waiting just outside the system. Admiral Reed studied the enemy ships with a trained eye. Interesting. Their ship designs have changed, but their attack formations remain the same. He pointed to the display. Look how they position their heavy cruisers at these points. Classic Vraxian encirclement strategy. Miller felt a chill. They were prepared for this. For us. Of course they were, Reed said, his voice hard. They feared the Retribution's return for centuries. Now we know why. They never stopped preparing for war. A communication alert sounded, and the main screen activated to show a different Vraxian, older, with elaborate markings on his scales that indicated high rank. I am High Commander Vex of the Vraxian Protectorate, the alien announced. You have fired upon our scout ship in violation of treaty agreements. Surrender immediately. Reed stepped forward. This is Admiral Thomas Reed of the Federation battleship Retribution. Your forces have been building in violation of the treaty for decades. We will not surrender. The High Commander's face showed no surprise at seeing Reed. Admiral Reed, your reputation survived the centuries, as did your misunderstandings about our intentions. There's no misunderstanding, Reed replied coldly. We have the evidence, your plans for the Great Molting, your strategic positioning throughout human space. You never intended peace. Vex's expression changed subtly. The humans of your time were not ready to understand our biology or our culture. Those who came after were more accommodating. You mean those who betrayed us, Reed said, who sabotaged my ship and erased us from history. A regrettable necessity, Vex responded. Your vessel represented a threat to peaceful coexistence. Miller stepped into view. And your fleet? Is that for peaceful coexistence too? Vex turned his attention to Miller. Captain, I suggest you and your crew leave the Retribution immediately. This matter predates your lifetime. There is no need for you to die over ancient history. Ancient history that's about to repeat itself, Miller replied. Your fleet proves everything Admiral Reed has said. Vex's patience visibly thinned. This is your final warning. Abandon that vessel, or we will destroy it, with you aboard. Reed cut the communication. He's stalling again, he said to Miller, giving their ships time to move into optimal firing positions. He turned to the weapons console. Computer, what's our combat status? Defensive shields at 68% capacity, the AI reported. Main weapons at 43%. Secondary systems online. Estimated combat effectiveness, 52% of optimal. Not ideal, Reed admitted, but we faced worse odds. Miller looked at his team. They hadn't signed up for this, a battle against overwhelming forces in a 300-year-old war. We should try to contact Alliance Command, he suggested. Tell them what's happening here. The Vraxians are jamming all outgoing communications, Davis reported from the communication station. We're cut off. Reed nodded grimly. They don't want evidence of their treachery reaching your government. He studied the tactical display again. We have one advantage they don't expect. What's that? Taylor asked. The Prometheus Protocol, Reed said. Computer, initiate Prometheus Protocol. Authorization, read Final Omega. Warning, the AI responded. Prometheus Protocol will redirect all power to experimental systems. Life support will be reduced to minimal levels in non-essential areas. Proceed. Confirmed, Reed said. Proceed. The lights dimmed briefly throughout the ship, then stabilized. On the tactical display, new weapon systems came online. Systems unlike anything Miller had seen before. What is this? He asked. The reason they feared us, Reed explained. Quantum phase weaponry. Technology that was decades ahead of its time. And apparently still is. He looked at Miller. This is what they tried to prevent us from using. What the traitors sabotage. The tactical display beeped urgently. Vraxian vessels firing, the AI announced. Evasive maneuvers, Reed ordered. Bring us about to heading 047. Prepare to return fire. The massive battleship moved with surprising grace for its size, turning to face the oncoming Vraxian fleet. Enemy weapons fire streaked toward them, bright lances of energy that would have torn apart a modern Alliance vessel. But when they struck the Retribution's shields, something unexpected happened. Instead of struggling under the attack, the shields actually brightened, seeming to absorb the energy. Shield capacity increasing to 75%. The AI reported. Energy absorption systems functioning. Reed smiled for the first time since his awakening. They've forgotten what the Retribution can do. Their weapons are actually making us stronger. That's impossible, Foster said, staring at the readings. Not impossible, Reed corrected. Just beyond your current science. The Prometheus project developed technology that could convert enemy weapons fire into usable energy. He turned to Miller. Now, Captain, shall we show them why they were right to fear us? Miller hesitated only briefly. If what Reed said was true, if the Vraxians had been planning humanity's destruction for centuries, then this wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. Fire at will, Admiral, he ordered. Reed's fingers danced across the command console. Target their lead vessels. Fire main quantum phase cannon. The Retribution shuddered as its main weapon discharged. Not a beam of energy like conventional weapons, but a rippling distortion that crossed space almost instantly. When it reached the first Vraxian cruiser, the enemy ship simply came apart, its matter destabilizing at the quantum level. 3 more Vraxian ships suffered the same fate before the fleet scattered in panic, breaking their careful formation. "My God," Taylor whispered. "1 shot each." "Now they remember," Reed said, his voice quiet but intense. This is what they feared, a weapon they couldn't defend against. The Vraxian communication channel activated again. High Commander Vex's face showed controlled fury. "This proves everything we have maintained for centuries. Your species created a weapon of mass destruction. You forced us to take action." "You betrayed us first," Reed countered. "You planned our extinction while pretending to negotiate peace." "And now," Vex demanded, "will you destroy our entire fleet, reignite a war that ended generations ago?" Reed looked at Miller, leaving the decision to him. Miller stepped forward. "We don't want war, Commander. We want truth. Stand down your fleet and agree to immediate discussions with the Human Alliance about your treaty violations. Otherwise," he let the threat hang unspoken, gesturing to the destroyed Vraxian ships. Vex's scaled face showed calculation. "You are outnumbered. Your weapon is formidable, but our fleet can overwhelm you with concentrated fire." "Perhaps," Reed acknowledged. "But how many ships will you lose before that happens? Half your fleet? More?" He stepped closer to the screen. "And what happens when we release all our data to the Human Alliance? The evidence of your deception, your treaty violations, your plans for the Great Molting." Vex's eyes narrowed. "What do you propose?" As Captain Miller said, "Immediate discussions with the Human Alliance. Full disclosure of your military buildup and your plans. A new treaty, one with real verification this time." For a long moment, Vex was silent, clearly communicating with others off-screen. Finally, he turned back. "We will withdraw to the outer system and permit communications with your alliance. But the retribution remains a prohibited weapon under existing treaties. It cannot be allowed to operate freely." "The retribution will be placed under Alliance control," Miller said. "Its technology studied by human scientists, not dismantled or surrendered." Another pause, then a curt nod. "Agreed. For now." The communication ended. The Vraxian ships began to pull back, maintaining a wary distance from the retribution. "They'll be back," Reed said quietly. "With a larger fleet. This isn't over." "No," Miller agreed. "But now we're prepared. And we have the truth." He looked around at the ancient battleship that had survived centuries to deliver its warning. "The retribution didn't just come back for revenge, Admiral. It came back to save us." Reed nodded slowly. "Perhaps that's the true retribution. Not punishment for past wrongs, but prevention of future ones." He extended his hand to Miller. "Thank you, Captain, for believing when no one else would." As they shook hands, the main lights returned to full power throughout the ship, illuminating corridors that had been dark for 3 centuries. "Computer," Reed said, "begin revival protocols for senior staff. It's time to wake up my crew." He turned to Miller with determined eyes. "They've slept long enough, and humanity has been blind for too long." Outside the viewports, the stars seemed to shine brighter as the retribution, no longer a myth but a very real guardian, prepared for its new mission in a time not its own, but desperately in need of its protection.